All right, let's make sure everyone can hear me clearly. Can you please press yes if you can hear me clearly? All right, sounds good. So let's hear, what are your percentile scores in CR, current percentile? Okay, Akash, you're saying that in practice module you have 80 percentile. Not quite sure what that means. What you're saying in practice, in practice files you have 80% score, because that's not exactly 80th percentile. So, all right, Ishan, you like the session on how to create error log in SC, so you're very much excited. That's good. I'm glad that you enjoy this session as well. Let's see. I'm looking forward to it. Geo, this morning I scored 77, but yesterday 40. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's get started here. It's 9 o'clock at my end, 8 a.m. Pacific. So let's get going. All right. My name is Payal Tandon. I am one of the co-founders of GMAT, and today I'll be your host for this session on how do you create error log for critical reasoning. Now, before we go into the details of this session, let's talk about let's hear from you as to what is it that you capture in your error log today for critical reasoning. What kind of information do you capture? And I do know that there are some standard information such as whether you got the question correct or not. But in addition to that, I mean, those are just identifiers. But what it is that you capture today in your error log that helps you ace or that helps you improve in critical reasoning. So let's hear that from you all. CR error log, same as RC, SC error log, all one document. Again, it depends on you. I'm asking you what is it that you're doing today? Vague and general explanation. Okay. Give me some examples. And obviously you'll be able to give more specific examples when we get into the question solving mode. But right now I just want to get the gist of what it is that you are doing. Strong word like always, never. Okay, that's what you point out. Okay, what else? Okay, tell me, what is the purpose of an error log? Source of question, type of error, strengthen or weaken. Okay, so that's what you're capturing. All right. Tell me, what is the purpose of an error log? That's a good question, Rajat. How many of you capture your accuracy by CR question type? That is, how many questions do you get right? What percentage of questions do you get correct in assumption category, in weaken category, and so on and so forth? Notes of how to recognize similar problems, purpose, avoid making same mistake. Again, absolutely. I try to move forward through meaning route, but sometimes that single variable, that missing link, I'm not able to identify and pre-think it. Okay, all right. So, all right, let's get going then. My goal is that by the time you reach second or third question in this session, you will have a very strong idea of what all is it that you need to capture in your error log, because ultimately there's no point in you solving question after question if you're not getting the essence out of each question. And the essence, by essence, I mean you need to get everything that you can from that question. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Now, how many of you over here attended the SC error log session or viewed the recording of the session after the session was done? Or how many of you are aware of our error log philosophy that I shared with you last week, I believe, for sentence correction? Okay, Kanha, yes. Geo, okay. Lag tutor, all right. I'm not aware of error log philosophy. Okay, that's fine. That's okay. After this session, I would urge you to look at the SC error log session as well. All right, let's get going now. Sakar, first session, welcome. All right. Okay, the agenda really is I want to demonstrate how is it that you do a strategic review of questions, the goal of which is to figure out what exactly you did wrong while you were solving this question so that you can improve when you solve the next set of questions. Okay, so strategically reviewing questions is very, very, very important. Okay, now I would also say one thing, something which I told in my previous session and in all my sessions. Then if you're solving a question, you need to take at least 10 to 15 minutes to review the solutions of those questions, of that particular question. Okay, so that is where the strategic review comes about. Okay, so we are going to be talking about that part here. Then after that, we're going to talk about how is it that you create error log. Not after that, as I show you how to do strategic review, a very, very natural outcome of that is how is it that you create, sorry about that. Okay. 1 second, guys. Let me just fix my computer here. All right. Share the screen. Okay. Yeah. So the very natural consequence of doing strategic review is your entries for the error log. Now, we'll get going with solving the first question here. Question number 1. All the questions in this are going to be from the official guide, and these are difficult questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 90 seconds to solve the question. And as you get to the answer, type in your answer in the chat pod over here, and then we'll carry on with the discussion. Now, whatever is the, okay, before we go here, I want to hear from you. What is the process that you use today to solve questions? CR questions. And tell me that I first do this, then I do this, and then I do that. So tell me, what is it that you, how is it that you approach a CR question? And let's talk about an assumption question as an example. Because I want to capture what is the method that you use today, and then I want you to use that same method on this question. So Geo, you identify the conclusion, and then what is it that you do? First, identify conclusion, Vivek. After that, what is it that you do? Read the question, find the conclusion, find the gap, and then review the answer choices, Vishal. That's what I believe you're saying. Babar, depending upon the question, find the assumption. Abhishek, stem, question, you read the question stem, then you read then you figure out the answer choices. Okay. Use method from popular program, identify an assumption that would break before reading the question choices. Good. Babar, you do pre-thinking. Very nice. Read the passage, preface possible answer, choose among losers and contenders. All right. Okay, that sounds good. It appears as if a number of you do try to think about the correct answer before you start looking at the answer choices. So that is good. All right. So let's now solve this question over here. Go ahead. All right. Let's get a few more responses here. I have 50 people here and only 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 responses. Let's get some more going. All right. Okay, last few seconds, about 10 more seconds. Let's get some more responses here. Okay. Now, so this is a weekend question. The first thing that we're going to do is, okay, let me tell you the stats here. So just approximately about 15 people selected choice B, about 5 people selected choice E, and then about 2 to 3 people selected choice C. Okay, now that's the typical stats. These stats are along the lines of what we have seen on our platform as well. About 50% of the people who have attempted this question, and then we have thousands of attempts on this question, selected choice B as the correct answer, and B is indeed the correct answer. Again, the most popular incorrect choice is choice E, which about 32% of people select, and then beyond that, choices A, C, and D, similar affinity to those choices. Okay, all right. So now we'll go into the process that we follow here at GMAT to solve any CR question. And that's a pre-thinking based process. Now, the first thing that you have to do is you have to understand the passage in its entirety. By that, what I mean is I don't even care as to what the question statement is. I want to first make sure that I understand each and every entity that's presented in the passage. Okay, so for that, I'm going to read the passage and I'm going to extract as much information as I can from the passage. Now, all of you have read the passage, right? So what I'm going to do is read through the passage, identify the items, and then I'm going to ask you how many items were you not able to identify from the list that I provide to you. Okay, it is widely assumed that people need to engage in intellectual activities such as solving crossword puzzles or mathematics problems in order to maintain mental sharpness as they age. So this first statement simply provides us with a generally accepted belief that people need to engage in such activities and intellectual activities in order to maintain their mental sharpness, okay, as they age. So that's what we are talking about. In fact, however, now you see the word however, that tells you that there is a change in the direction of the passage. Simply talking to other people, that is participating in social interaction, which engages many mental and perceptual skills, suffices. So what is the author saying? The author is saying you don't really need to engage in intellectual activities. If you simply converse with other people, which he's terming as social interaction, that itself will suffice. Suffice to do what? Suffice to maintain mental sharpness as people age. Okay, it will suffice to do that. Okay, now I want you to focus on one thing. As I'm reading, I'm in contextualizing the information in my own words. I'm relating the information back and forth. Over here, suffices to do what? Suffices to maintain mental sharpness as they age. So that's very important to set up such linkages as you are reading the sentence, as you're reading the passage. Evidence to this effect. Now, evidence to what effect? Evidence to the fact that social interaction is sufficient comes from a study showing. Now what does the study show? The study shows that the more the social contact people report, the better their mental skills. Okay, so now what the author is doing is he's proving his conclusion that social interaction is sufficient. Okay, social interaction is sufficient. He's proving that conclusion by utilizing this study in which the more the social contact people report, the better their mental skills. Okay, now these are the three items which I want all of you to have understood if you read the passage the right way. The first one is, what is a typical belief? The typical belief is that you need to engage in intellectual activities in order to maintain mental sharpness. What is the author's belief? That social interaction alone is sufficient to maintain mental sharpness. What is the evidence that the author using? Study that showed that more the social contact, the better their mental skills. Now tell me, select the aspects that you could not understand with this clarity when you read the passage on your own. And if you understood everything, then select option number 4. I'd like to see more of option 4 in your responses. So lack tutor could not get number 2 over here. Okay. All right. Let's get some more. Akash, Samarth, Vivek, Geo, all of you could get all the 3 aspects. Good. So lack tutor, again, you have to understand why is it that you were not able to get to, why is it that you were not able to understand this belief? Okay, because that is the conclusion that the author is driving. Okay, Asim also was not able to get that. Dishank wasn't able to get the evidence part. So again, and again, I'm going to show you, I want you to keep this in mind. It's really very important. Okay, the items which you're not able to get from passage analysis, I want you to make a note of these things. Okay, because then we're going to understand why is it that you were not able to get these items and what is the corrective action for that. Okay, so Ayush, didn't know the meaning of suffice. Okay, suffice is a pretty general word. So you would really need to know the meaning of suffice. And even if you don't know the precise meaning of suffice, you can always infer the meaning, right? When the author is saying that when the author is presenting a generally accepted belief that people need to engage in intellectual activities in order to maintain mental sharpness, and then when he's saying, however, you know that, okay, he's going to contradict what he's already said. He's going to contradict the generally accepted view. So automatically you'll know that, okay, suffices means that it's sufficient to the social interaction itself is sufficient to maintain mental sharpness. So even if you don't know the precise meaning, you can always infer the meaning from the context. Again, that's possible only if you go deep into the context. If you stay at the surface, then you won't be able to understand. Okay, so I hope that helps, Ayush. Lorenzo, I was clear due to single viewpoint and very chronological. Some 700 questions have various viewpoints and much more confusing. And again, over here also, there are 2 viewpoints. One is the widely assumed viewpoint, that the generally accepted, which is what we are saying typical belief, and the other is the author's belief. Okay, all right. Suchi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so I really apologize if I'm butchering your name. So you're French and you sometimes read the prompt quickly and miss the subtleties, and then you get to the wrong answer. Again, we have a solution for you. Don't worry about that. It's good that you have identified the problem. All right, so a number of you were able to identify everything in the passage. Few of you were not able to identify number 2 and number 3. Again, we'll talk about what it is that you need to do. Okay, but one thing that I want everyone to understand is you need to get to this level of clarity for any passage that you read. If you don't have this level of clarity, then all the steps beyond this are going to be really very difficult for you to do. In fact, you won't be able to do those steps the right way. Okay, all right. Now, the question prompt over here, that's the next thing that we do. Which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the force of evidence cited? And this is a very, very important thing, force of the evidence cited. Okay. Now, what do we need to weaken? I want you to write that down. Prompt number 1 or 2. Do we need to weaken the findings of the study? Or do we need to weaken the usage of the study to prove author's point, that is, social interaction is sufficient to maintain mental sharpness? What is it that we need to weaken here? 1 or 2? Absolutely, we need to weaken point number 2 and not point number 1, and that's very important to understand. Before you even set out to create your framework, your pre-thinking framework, you need to know what it is that you need to get to, right? What is it that you're pre-thinking? You're not weakening the findings of the study. Findings of the study are given as is. You cannot weaken that, right? That's what the author states. That's a fact, right? But what you are weakening is the usage of the study to prove that social interaction is sufficient to maintain mental sharpness. Okay. All right. So now we get into our pre-thinking. Now, again, I do want to state one thing, that I'm not teaching you how to pre-think here. My goal is to teach you that once you know how to pre-think, how is it that you do strategic review of the questions in order to understand what part of the process you need to focus on. Okay, so if you don't understand any of this, then again, I want you to look into the course. understand how is it that pre-thinking needs to be done, because then you need to understand the basics of pre-thinking. And again, Rajat did a webinar regarding pre-thinking that's going to give you some introduction towards it. Okay, some introduction for it. Weakener framework. What new information will make us believe less in the effectiveness of the evidence? Now, this is what captures the essence. What is the evidence? The evidence states that the more the social interaction reported, the better the mental sharpness. And what does that evidence prove? That evidence proves that social interaction is sufficient to maintain mental sharpness. So all we are doing is we've understood what it is that we need to weaken, and we are simply putting that in a weakener framework for us so that we can understand what it is that we are doing. And again, at times you need to further simplify that further. The study presented two facts. What were the two facts? The two facts were that if there is more social interaction, then there is more mental sharpness. That's what the study reported, right? Now, the author is inferring that causality. The author is saying, okay, because there is more social interaction and in those people there is better mental sharpness, this means that the social interaction is what led to the mental sharpness. That's what the author is assuming. And that causality is what we have to, the author is inferring that causality, and that is what we need to weaken. Okay. Now, how is it that we can, so how is it that we can weaken that? What if, and again, this is a simple causality that we have to weaken, and there are set ways in which you can weaken a causality. One is, what if there is some other cause? I mean, right now the author is saying that X leads to Y. What if there is some Z that leads to both X and Y, right? That is my pre-thinking number one, right? The other thing could be, what if Y leads to X? The causality is not that X leads to Y, it is actually Y leads to X, okay? So again, you can basically have, or what you can have is that X stays here, but then there is something else that causes Y, right? So again, this is a typical way in which you can weaken a typical causal framework, right? Now, based on your understanding of that, now you take a look at the answer choices and see which ones actually fit the bill. Okay. Now, you don't even need to come up with a very precise pre-thinking before you start looking at the answer choices. But what you absolutely need to have is, do you understand all of this really well? Do you understand what the author is saying? Which means that if you don't understand the point number 2 and 3 from our initial analysis, you would not be able to get to this. Okay, Vivek, definitely this is a 700 level question. This is a difficult question. In the official guide, according to our stats, the accuracy is barely touching 50%. So it is a difficult question. Okay, so now let's take a look at the answer choice analysis. Choice A, nobody selected that. Again, all choice A is saying is that as people grow older, they are often advised to keep exercising their physical and mental capacities in order to maintain or improve them. Now over here, it's simply explaining the reason behind the generally accepted view. So there's nothing new that the author is telling us. Now, many medical conditions and treatments that adversely affect a person's mental sharpness also tend to increase that person's social isolation, right? Now, what I want you to tell me is, what category of, now most of you selected this choice, okay, choice B is the correct answer. Tell me, what pre-thinking item does it cover? Does it fall under? What is this choice doing? Is it giving a new cause? Is it reversing the causality? What is it doing? Is it truly reversal? What is it doing? Let's go back to our pre-thinking here. What if some other cause is responsible for both the facts? What if the effect leads to the cause? Absolutely, Ganesh, this is capturing point number 1 over here. Okay, what it's saying is that many medical conditions, some Z that affects mental sharpness that leads to Y also lead to X. Z leads to Y also leads to X. That's what it's doing. Okay, so it's presenting some other cause which is responsible for both X and Y. Okay, that's what it's doing. Okay, now again, and that's where, if you have a very clear idea of what it is that is, of what is it that's going to weaken your conclusion, When you review the answer choices, you have a very solid framework to see what is happening here. Over here, yes, Z leads to Y, Z also leads to X. So really, this is another cause which is responsible for both X and Y. Okay, and that's which is now weakening your causality that the author was setting up. Okay, now let's look at choice C. A couple of you selected choice C. Many people are proficient both in social interactions and in solving mathematical problems. Now over here, this is simply describing characteristics of many people, that there are people who are proficient in both social and social interactions and analytical problems, right? But it's not saying anything about the causality that the author is concluding, right? So again, this choice is playing on you simply staying on the surface of the passage and not going deep into what the author is saying in the passage. So people who selected choice C, and there were a couple of you who selected choice C, you fell into that trap. For you, I would say you haven't understood the passage really well. That's why you selected choice C. Okay. Now let's look at choice D. The study did not itself collect data but analyzed data bearing on the issue from prior studies. Doesn't matter how the data was collected. All we have to do is the study's findings stay intact. That's what the author is telling us. The author is inferring certain causality, and that is what we have to weaken here. How the study got the data has no bearing on it. Okay, so that's why this choice is wrong. Choice E, which again quite a few of you selected, and again choice C is playing on the fact that you are staying on the surface of the passage. What do I mean by that? Look at what choice C is saying. Tasks evaluating mental sharpness, okay, were more akin to mathematics problems than to conversation. How does it matter how mental sharpness was evaluated? All you care about is, all you know for sure is from the study that if people who have higher social interaction, these people also report better mental sharpness. Now, how this mental sharpness is calculated in the first place has no bearing on the causality that the author is setting from X to Y. How that Y was calculated has no bearing. So again, people who selected choice E, again, stayed on the surface. Does this make sense? And there were quite a few of you who selected choice E. So I want you to, and this is why it's very important to know the confines of your passage. What is the passage talking about? And that's why, let's go back to the previous slide over here. Sorry. Yeah, that's why it's very important to get to this part over here. So people who weren't able to get to points number 2 and 3, you would have ultimately selected incorrect answer choice. People who got everything over here, they stand a lot better chance of getting to the correct answer because they know the confines of their passage. Does this make sense? Yes or no? Okay. Next, what we're going to do is, I'm going to tell you now that you have reviewed the solution. So let's cut from the question right now. Let's just talk about the strategic review process. How is it that we solve the question? We solve the question by understanding all the information in the passage. Then we visualized how the author is drawing the conclusion, right? How the author is drawing the conclusion. We are not just, in this first step, we are just concerned about what the author is saying. In this second step, we are thinking about, okay, how the author has put the pieces together. Now, this is where we came up with that the author is taking the study and he's taking the two facts in the study and he's doing a causal relationship between the two facts presented in the study, right? Then we create our pre-thinking framework. We understand what the question is telling us, and then we come up with a pre-thinking framework. We pre-think, right? We think about creating pre-thinking framework is not enough. We have to take that step further, that next step, to actually pre-think what is it, how is it that we can weaken the conclusion, right? And then based on this, we analyze the answer choices. Okay. Now, all of these steps need to be done in order to get to the correct answer. Okay. Now, for those of you who were, and people falter at each one of these steps. Now, where you falter, that is what you have to figure out in order to do strategic review. that should be the output of your strategic review process. If you were not able to understand all the information in the passage, this means that you belong in group D. Okay, I want you to note that down. Okay, for everyone who did not select 4 in that understanding passage part question, I want your number would be you belong in group D. Okay, and your corrective action is going to be different. Okay, so that's why it's very important to understand what group do you fall in. Visualize how the author draws the conclusion, group C. If you were not able to visualize the part that the author is putting some causality in the information that's presented, that's you then belong in group C. Okay. Create pre-thinking framework. You belong in group B1 if you're not able to do this, right? So again, all of this is if you were not able to do this, you belong in group B1. Now, what does group B1 stand for? What it stands for is that you understood the passage really well. If you were able to do this part, then you understood the passage really well. And you thought you have enough understanding, sufficient understanding to jump directly to answer choice analysis. Okay, that means you didn't even try to pre-think. It's not that I don't know whether you can or cannot pre-think, but you didn't even try to pre-think. That's when you belong in B1, group B1. Now, let's say you were able to create your pre-thinking framework. You understood the passage, you were able to create your framework, but you were not able to come up with even a single pre-thinking answer. That means you belong in group B2. Okay, if you were not able to pre-think even a single answer. Okay, and your corrective action is going to be different from group B1's corrective action. Okay, now let's say you did everything. You were able to pre-think. You knew that, okay, this is how I have to. This is what I'm looking for in the correct answer choice. But still, you ended up selecting incorrect answer choice. That means you belong in group A. And this is where you have to do further analysis of why is it. There are 2 things that you have to do here. 2 things over here. One is, why did I reject the correct answer? You have to figure the reason for that. Second one is, why did I select the incorrect answer? And the answer to both these questions are very, very important. Why? Because you have done everything. You've done pre-thinking. You understood the passage really well, but you still made a mistake. Why did you do that? Understanding that is very, very important. The other important thing is that there is no point in doing this analysis if, let's say, you didn't even do pre-thinking. So if you belong in group B1 or B2 or D or C, there is no point in doing this analysis. You need to do this analysis only if you know that, okay, you've done all the preceding steps absolutely correctly. Okay, does this make sense? This is your strategic review process. This is why you need to review the solution for at least 10 to 15 minutes so that you look at each and every step, small step of the process for you to select that final answer. Okay, and these are the entries that you have to make. Typically, what I suggest is for every, let's say you are taking a 10-question quiz. Okay, for each question, you review the solution, you come up with the group. Okay, even if you get the question correct, okay, you still should review the solution so that you make sure that you understood everything that you needed to understand, so that you didn't answer the question correctly just by fluke. So it's very, very important to do that. Now, let's say for 10 questions that you did, you turn out to be in group B2, let's say 5 times, in group A, let's say 4 times, and so remaining one, group C, you were there 1 time. Which means that the major problem lies in you not being able to pre-think. Okay, you're trying to follow the process, but you're still not able to pre-think. The problem also lies in you not able to analyze the answer choices correctly, which means you're not doing the 2-step analysis of the answer choice, of each answer choice. And what are those 2 steps? The first step is to understand what the choice is saying, and then to evaluate. Maybe you are skipping the understanding part, or maybe you're not able to evaluate it correctly. So for that, you need to review the solution. So your corrective action for this kind of grouping is going to be very different from your corrective action if, let's say, you belonged in group D for 5 questions and group B1 for, let's say, 4 questions, and again group C for 1 question. Your corrective action for this grouping is going to be very, very different. Okay. Does this make sense, or is it too overwhelming? I want to understand that. Because next I'm going to ask you, for those of you who, even if you got the question correct, did you get the questions right for the right reasons? That's very important. And again, why is such detailed analysis important? Because you don't need to be solving hundreds and hundreds of questions. If you do this analysis, this level of analysis on, let's say, 40 questions, okay, you would be able to get to your target percentile, okay, a lot quicker. But if you don't do this level of analysis, no matter how many questions you solve, it would become a very, very laborious exercise for you to get to your target score. Okay. All right. So now, so this is the group. This is what I have written down for each of the groups. Again, I'll be sharing the PDF with you, so you can have that at that time. But again, whatever I said, it's all captured over here. Okay. Now, what group do you belong to for this particular question? That is what I want you to write down. Do you belong to group D, C, B1, B2, A? Regardless of whether you got the question correct or not. Because again, you have to get the question right for the right reasons. Lactutor is saying B2, which means you were not able to pre-think. Geo is saying you belong to B2. Good. Very nice. And see, you are being critical of yourself, which is very, very important. The more critical you are at this stage, the better it is for you when you are taking the test. B2, Vivek is also saying B2. Okay. So let me take up a few. Lorenzo is saying challenge is that sometimes the passage is ambiguous or has a lot of inference. For example, it's not clear that it was the author's opinion. So Lorenzo, you have to expose yourself to the right kind of material. Okay, you have to prepare using the right kind of material that teaches you how to spot these things. Again, I'm not teaching you right now. Okay, I'm not teaching you how to pre-think. I'm not teaching you how to infer. I'm just telling you that, okay, if this is the process you're following, this is how you have to do strategic review. Now, for you to be able to get to that level that you can, the process, you have to learn the right way. So in the GMAT CR course, we have foundation blocks, okay, and then we have the inference block in which we teach you how do you infer information. Okay, so for you, I believe that is going to be very important. The same thing holds true for you, Vivek. If you cannot understand the convoluted language, again, you have to expose yourself to the right kind of material. Okay, and again, at GMAT, that's what we have done. When we created the CR course, we reviewed each and every official question, and we figured out, okay, what kind of complexity does the author add in the passage, right? The passage can be written in a simple way and in a complex way, right? How is the author adding that complexity? And or doing all of that stuff, we basically then created, after doing all that research, we then created our course. So again, expose yourself to the right kind of material and you should be able to then get to the right level in CR. B2, Group C. Okay. All right, good. So now do you guys understand that how is it that you have to do strategic review? Okay. Now, after I do second question, I'm going to tell you what the corrective action for each of these groups should be. But I do want us to get some more information about some more group information. Okay. Okay. Now, you're saying that I feel confident, but when I look at the time, I get stressed out and rush everything. Again, when you're learning the process, do not even look at the time. Okay, we are not there yet. Okay, so you just focus on learning each and every step of the process. Okay, but don't worry about the time at all. That's why I didn't give you any time limit, right? You're not right now. You're not in that test taking mode right now. You're in the learning mode right now. Okay. Pre-thinking has many possibilities, so I stuck between two options thinking that which pre-think scenario might be suitable. Again, we went through each and every answer choice here, right, Parka? So we didn't find that there was the pre-thinking matched only one answer choice. All the other answer choices we could very well disregard. And that's why it's very important to know what are the confines of your passage, okay? Knowing your passage map, and that's where the visualization comes about. Okay, if you're able to visualize how the author has constructed the passage, then you will not fall in this thing of, okay, I'm stuck between two choices, because it's very rare that you are truly stuck between two choices after having gone through the process the right way. It's very rare. If you've done the process the right way, then you would definitely know, then the incorrect answer choices will definitely jump out at you and you'll have a solid reasoning for it. Okay. And that's why I'm saying you have to be very, very, very critical of yourself. Okay. All right. Let's solve question number 2, and then we'll go into the corrective action of each of these groups. Okay. Here you go. All right. So I see quite a few A's, and A is the correct answer. I do see a couple of D's and a couple of C's. Okay. All right. Now, how many of you are confident of your responses? Choice A is the correct answer. But even when we select the correct answer, we usually have that thing. Okay, am I confident? Am I, or is it? This was a close call. So, how many of you are confident with your selection? Okay, so Kana is confident. Vishal is confident. Okay. All right. Now, just based on what we did for the previous question, and again, we will look at the solution in detail. Tell me, which group do you think you belong to right now itself? Based on, again, I know you haven't reviewed the solution. I will go through the solution, but right now, what's your feel for, were you able to follow through all the steps? Okay. 200%. Akash is 200% confident. Good. All right. So group A. All right. Good. Sounds good. So let's go through the stats here. This is, I won't say it's uber difficult question. It is 55% accuracy. OG classifies it as a difficult question, I believe. But again, choices B and C are the close calls, are the close choices. Okay. Now, again, this is one of those questions wherein I could have made, if I had the liberty to change the choices, I could have made this question a lot more difficult. But again, what I want to tell you is that how is it that what all information do you need to capture from the passage? Okay. Now, if this question appeared in your study guide, right, appeared in your questions list, and you got the question correct, don't just move on without doing a thorough strategic review. Do a proper strategic review so that you get everything from this question. Okay, it's your opportunity to get as much as you can from these questions. And how I want you to think about this is that the test makers have created this gem of a question, right? Give it its do due diligence from your side to get as much as you can from it. Okay. All right. So now let's do the passage analysis. In Wareland last year, 16% of licensed drivers under 21 and 11% of drivers ages 21 to 24 were in serious accidents. By contrast, again, there is a comparison here. Only 3% of licensed drivers 65 and older were involved in serious accidents. These figures clearly show, and this is where the author's conclusion is, that greater experience and developed habits of caution possessed by the older drivers, make them far safer behind the wheel than the younger drivers are. Okay. So really, there are three data points that have been given. Okay. There are 3 data points that have been given. Age less than 21, 16% of them fall into serious accidents, get into serious accidents. More than 65, only 3%. Reason for older people to be more safer than that more safe drivers than younger people is greater experience and developed habits of caution. Tell me, were you able to get everything? Most likely everyone would have been able to get everything from this passage. The passage itself is not difficult. Okay, so I think it's a safe assumption that everyone got everything from the passage. Okay, now what is the conclusion? I want you to tell me that. What is the conclusion? Is the conclusion that the older people are safer drivers? Or is the conclusion that older people are safer drivers because only 3% get involved in serious accidents? Or the conclusion is that older people are safer drivers because of their greater experience and developed habits of caution? Tell me, 1, 2, or 3, which is the conclusion? Vivek is saying 3. Okay, Vishal is saying 3. Good. Dwarkanath 3, Kanha 3. Good. Very nice. Good. Very nice. Number 3 is the conclusion, and that clarity is very, very important. Okay. Now, what we need to find the assumption, right? Now, for pre-thinking, really what we have to do is, in what scenario, and this is how any pre-thinking framework for assumption, this is how we come up with the pre-thinking framework. In what scenario does the conclusion break? Okay, in what scenario are older people not, that's what I'm saying by the breaking of conclusion, are not safer drivers because of their greater experience? Okay, given that, and then here the data comes about. Okay, now the output of pre-thinking will be what? Here we have to just think about scenarios. Okay, now with causal framework, with causal relationship, it was very straightforward that you break the causality. Now here you have to think a little bit. Now, one of the ways in which you can break this thing is that what if these people, you can actually break either you can either question the fact that are they truly safer, or you can question the fact that is truly the greater experience what is driving them being safe. So you can attack any of these angles to get to your pre-thinking. Okay, now what if they don't drive as much as younger people do? Okay, which means that they don't have that much scope to get into serious accidents, which means that truly they are not safer. It's just that they don't really have that much of scope to get into serious accidents, right? So that is one. What if driving conditions experienced by the older people are not as aggressive as the driving conditions experienced by younger people? For example, let's say younger people have to drive during the peak hours, office hours, versus non-peak hours of the older people. So again, now what you're saying is, are you comparing the two? Are you comparing apples to apples, or are you comparing apples to oranges? So both of these are attacking what we are calling as the comparison. Absolutely correct, Babar. We are hinging upon the comparison aspect. aspect of it. Okay, are you really putting both older and younger people on the same level, on the same playing field, right? What if, now this is another one, this one is attacking the greater experience part. What if older people actually don't have greater experience? Maybe the older people started driving beyond the age of 65 only. They are also as maybe they are as new as the younger generation. Okay, so that is what we are talking about over here. So these are the things of regarding pre-thinking. Okay, now how many of you were able to pre-think along these lines? Tell me, what all were you able to pre-think? Yes, what you're saying is, what if the number of younger drivers are very high, say 1,000, but older people are just 10? Again, what you are talking about is that do these stats make sense? Is the 3%, is the 10% statistically significant based on statistically significant data? And you're correct, yes. 1 and 2, I thought the same, okay. Only 1 and 2, only 2, okay. This would explain the statistics and also refute the author. Absolutely, yes, yes. So what, again, over here, you don't have to come up with all the ways of pre-thinking, okay, with all the possible pre-thinking. But if you come up with even one, it just gives you a lot more confidence in your understanding of the logic that the author is using. And I believe somebody had asked a question earlier that what if my pre-thinking does not match what the correct answer is? It's absolutely okay. Even if your pre-thinking doesn't match the correct answer, the whole point of pre-thinking, of doing pre-thinking, is to get that level of, to get you absorbed in the CR passage, to get you more close to the argument that the author is making. All you're doing is you are getting as much invested in the passage by pre-thinking as the author is. That's about it. That's the goal of pre-thinking. Goal of pre-thinking is not predict. Pre-thinking is not same as prediction. Pre-thinking is just a means for you to get to that level of understanding that the author has, so that now you can take a look at the answer choices and say, oh yeah, this one is my assumption, this one is not my assumption. So that's all you're doing. Okay, now how is it that you can come up with multiple pre-thinkings? If you go through the course in the right manner, if you go through the pre-thinking files that are there, the application files that are there, that's when you get exposed to the right kind of material, to the appropriate kind of material that helps you think. Okay, the files that you have in the course, we ask you leading questions. What if this happens? What if that happens? What we make you think? Right now, if you're learning in that manner, that's when the effectiveness, that's when your process is going to get solidified. Okay, all right. So now let's, with this output in mind, we're going to evaluate each and every answer choice. Driver 65 and older do not, on average, drive very many fewer miles per year than drivers 24 and younger. Now, this is where I mentioned that it's a two-step process to understand, to evaluate an answer choice. It's a to analyze an answer choice. It's a two-step process. One is you need to understand what the author is saying in the answer choice. Okay, without worrying about what your pre-thinking is or what the passage is. Just understand what the choice is saying, and then you evaluate it along the lines of your pre-thinking. Okay, driver 65 and older, so we're talking about the older drivers. Okay, older drivers do, on average, we are talking about on average, do not on average drive very many fewer miles. Now there is a double negative over here in some way. They do not drive very many fewer miles. What this means is that they drive decent number of miles, or comparative number of miles than, so comparable number of miles as drivers 24 and younger. So all this is saying is that older people drive similar number of miles as 24 as younger people do. So this understanding part you have to do very well. Okay, now again, this is where if you miss out on do not, If you don't focus that there is a not over here, you're going to lose the whole thing. If you don't understand what does this very many fewer miles mean, you're going to lose the opportunity to even evaluate this answer choice. So again, this step is very, very important. Okay, and that's why if you do belong in group A, you need to do this analysis. Am I getting this correct? Did I spend the time in evaluating this answer choice the right way? Okay, so this is the correct answer choice over here. It's along the lines. Now, once you simplify it in your own words, you then say, oh, this is exactly what I was talking about in pre-thinking number 1, right? So you actually have your answer. Now, for those of you, and there were a few of you who rejected choice, who selected some other answer choice, you need to now make sure that you figure out why is it that you rejected this choice, and that needs to go into your error log. Okay, Lorenzo, as I said, what do you do when the text or question is ambiguous and it's difficult to pre-think? Again, it would be difficult to pre-think if you haven't really learned the whole step-by-step process of how is it that you infer information, how is it that you get everything from the passage. Okay, Vishal is saying, our understanding of the argument that experienced people cause lesser accidents is not reflecting in answer choice A. Is the understanding irrelevant? Good question, Vishal. The understanding is not at all irrelevant. Remember what I said? What I said was that your assumption, the author makes multiple assumptions. Okay, the answer choice or one assumption need not be an assumption that captures all the assumptions. No. Even if there is one assumption, so you can actually come up with assumptions for the safer drivers or for the greater experience, or for just how the author is coming up with how the author is comparing one with the other, right? So any one of these can be assumptions. So for example, over here, this pre-thinking doesn't capture the greater experience part. This pre-thinking doesn't capture the greater experience part. These two pre-thinking 1 and 2, they are solely based on the comparison aspect of how we are coming up with the safer driver aspect. This one over here is the one that's capturing the greater experience, right? So again, the key thing over here is that you don't, it's a very good question that you're asking, Vishal. Your correct answer choice need not capture, should actually, typically it usually just takes care of one aspect. Okay, and that is what you need to make sure that it matches. Okay, all right. Now let's come to choice B. Drivers 65 and older, so older drivers, do not constitute a significantly larger percentage of licensed drivers in Wareland than younger drivers do. Now this need not, this has no impact on the conclusion. Why? Because all the argument is what percentage of that group is involved in the accident. It doesn't matter how many numbers of people are in that group, as long as there are sufficient number of people in the group. Okay, which means as long as the data is statistically significant, we are okay. Okay, as long as we can trust the percentage numbers, we are okay. But it doesn't matter whether there are more drivers who are more older drivers or more younger drivers. That doesn't matter. Okay, and that's why it's very important. Now, what this choice is playing on is the fact that there are answer choices wherein numbers are used but percentages are not used. So again, the quant based passages, right? So again, there is a whole different, not different, we have a separate pre-thinking file in which we talk about how do you handle quant based passages. So when you go through the logic that's there in those files, you'll understand that this choice is actually playing on your lack of understanding of that logic, or on your using that logic in a different manner. Oishik, it's not opposite. This choice has no impact on the conclusion whatsoever. Okay, and what I want you to do is, after this session, take some time, just take a couple of numbers, assume 80%, 20% case. Okay, flip that, and then you'll see that really it doesn't matter what percentage of 65 of older drivers exists. Okay, all right, let's look at choice C. Drivers 65 and older are less likely than younger drivers to drive during weather conditions that greatly increase the risk of accidents. Now, this one is somewhat linked to this part over here, our pre-thinking number 2. However, this is actually weakening this is not supporting the argument, this is actually weakening the argument, because what it's saying is that these drivers, they are not exposed to those bad driving conditions. Okay, so that is why this choice is wrong. So there were a few of you who selected choice C. You got confused. If you pre-thought this, okay, then you just got played, because the author over here, the answer choice over here actually is opposite, which is why, again, very, very important for you to follow that two-step process. Okay, you need to simplify what the answer choice is saying. What the answer choice is saying over here is that these older drivers are less likely to drive in extreme conditions. Okay, and you know that, okay, these extreme conditions, there's going to be higher chances of accidents, right? So now the drivers, these older drivers, they don't have that much scope to actually to get into an accident. Okay, so again, it's going in the opposite direction. Okay, so choice D and E, none of you actually selected, so we can just skip that. Now, tell me, what group do you belong to for this question, now that you've gone through the entire solution? B2, okay, B2, that you were not able to pre-think. You came up with the pre-thinking framework, but you were not able to pre-think. Geo belongs in group A, so I have B2, 1, then group A1, Vishal, B2, B1, Akash is group A. What else? B1, another one here. A to D, okay, this one. Yash is A. Okay, let's get some more. A probably. Okay, Babar is A. So quite a few of you are in group A. Okay, good. All right, now let's talk about, if you are not in group A, then again, obviously you need to do, okay, so let's talk about the corrective actions. Okay, corrective action for group D. And this is really for people, so I see a couple of you have been saying that, okay, what if the passages are too complex? What if the language is complex? What if I can't infer? Corrective action for you is not solving questions right now. Okay, definitely that's not how you're going to learn. You're going to learn first. You have to take an extreme step, which is that you have to build your foundations, which is for which you need to first go through master comprehension course, in which we take a sentence and we teach you how is it that you need to get everything from that sentence. Okay, second, you need to go through the inference module of CR. Okay, that's your foundation module. In this module, we teach you from the very basics. Now, once you learn how to read a sentence, we teach you, okay, how do you infer? If this is a given sentence, what all can you infer from this sentence? Okay, we increase the complexity of it. Now, let's say you don't have a single sentence. Now you have two sentences. How do you infer, and what all information can you infer from these two sentences? And then we take it up into a complete passage. How do you infer information from this entire passage? Okay, so this is what you need to do in order to do group D. Okay, if you are in group D, you have to take that extreme step of building your foundation skills. Does this make sense? I know if you feel, and again, you have to be very critical of yourself. Regardless of whether you're doing critical reasoning or sentence correction, or RC, you have to be very, very critical of yourself. Okay, and that's why if you face issues, if you're not able to draw that inference, if you look at the solution and if you think, okay, I wasn't able to draw this inference, take a step back. Okay, stop there and just say, okay, maybe I need to pause, I need to dial it down, and I need to just go back to the basics, build my foundation skills, and then I go on. Okay, very, very important. Okay, now let's talk about group C. If you are in group C, which means that you've understood the passage well, you are not able to visualize how the author is drawing the conclusion. For that, you need to look at pre-thinking files. We have a set of seven or five, I forget here, pre-thinking files. Okay, you need to go through that. Okay, and that's very, very important, because now what's going to happen is, in these pre-thinking files, all we are teaching you is, given a passage, how is it that you visualize the information that the author is saying, and then how do you take that visualization to that next step for you to pre-think. Okay, so that is the corrective action for you. Now, for people who are in group B1, what you are doing is, you are able to visualize the information fine, but you are not really spending the time to pre-think. You feel confident of your understanding of the passage, and you think that understanding is enough for you to answer the question. For you for the next set of questions, okay, you need to keep aside 1 minute to pre-think. Forget about the timer. As I said, you need to forget about the timer, okay, but you need to keep aside that 1 additional minute to pre-think. Okay, that's what you need to do for the next set of 10 questions that you solve, or for the next set of 5 questions that you solve. Okay, thank you, Rajat, for clarifying. So group C, there are 6 pre-thinking files. Okay, now what do I mean by 6 pre-thinking files in the course? What I mean by that is that we have selected passages, similar kind passages, we have grouped them into certain ways in which the argument is structured, and we have come up with these 6 different kinds of pre-thinking that you need to do. Six different kinds of arguments that you need to learn how to pre-think. And in the process of that, you're going to learn how is it that you visualize how the author draws the conclusion. Okay, so again, coming back to group B1, if you're not spending the time today to pre-think, then you, for the next set of questions, you need to set aside 1 minute of time to pre-think, because you need to know, can you pre-think or not? I don't know if you have the capability or not, and that's why you have to give yourself that chance to prove that, yes, I know how to pre-think, or no, I don't know how to pre-think. Now, let's say you are able to come up with the pre-thinking framework, but you still cannot pre-think. For that, again, you need to go through the pre-thinking files, and you need to go through all of assumption, application, and practice files, because that's when you need to revise those, or if you haven't gone through those, you need to go through those again. Okay, if you go through that, there is no reason why you would not come to group A. That is what people have told me. That is what our students tell us. If they do pre-thinking files really very well, okay, there is no reason why they would not fall in group A for all the questions that they solve, or for the majority of questions that they solve. Okay, so again, identifying where you are at or what group you belong to is very, very important to figure out what your next step should be. That's why when people ask me the question that, tell me how many questions do I need to solve, or tell me how long will I take, the answer to that is, it all depends upon where is it that you are at, and that depends on how well you do strategic review of questions. Okay, there could be 10 different types of people here right now, right? There could be some people for whom maximum of questions for maximum number of questions, they belong in group A. For them, the corrective action is very different. Whereas there could be people, many of you who belong to, for them, they belong to group B2 for many questions. For them, they need to stop solving questions. They need to go back to the pre-thinking files, go back to the basics. If majority is group D, then you need to go even further back. The whole point that I want you to all understand and take away from this session is, you need to start from a certain point. You need to do each of these steps the right way in order for you to be able to solve the question. And wherever you are faltering, and that's why it's very important to know where is it that you're faltering. Maybe for certain kind of questions, maybe let's say when you solve questions, you realize that wherever quant passages are involved, you're not able to pre-think. So now you have that power to get that information, and now you take that data with you and you say, okay, I don't need to do all the pre-thinking files, I just need to do the quant pre-thinking file. Okay, and how is it that you figure that out? If you do proper strategic review of questions, that's when you figure this out. Okay, now if you are in group A, then you have to figure out, why is it that you're not doing the two-step analysis of the answer choices? Are you faltering in step 1 or are you faltering in step 2? You need to figure that out. Okay, now, and then you can continue. Group A can continue to the next set of questions. Okay, group B1 can continue to the next set of questions. But if you are in group D, group B2, group C, you need to pause. You need to stop solving questions. You need to do something drastic. Okay, Vishal is asking, can you clarify the difference between B1 and B2? Vishal, the difference between B1 and B2 is B1 guy doesn't even try to pre-think. B1 guy is very confident that, okay, I've understood the passage really well. I don't really need to pause any further. Let me just jump to the answer choices. Okay, so he's skipping this and this part of the process completely. Okay, B2 guy is trying to pre-think. Okay, he knows that pre-thinking is important, but he's unable to pre-think, right? So for that guy, so B2 person will then need to go through the pre-thinking files because he needs to learn how to pre-think. Okay, that's the difference. So a B1 guy did not pre-think. Okay, a B2 guy could not pre-think. That's the difference. Okay. All right, now let's solve this last question and let's try to apply the process, and then we will do our group analysis. All right. All right. Let's, I haven't, there aren't that many responses right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, interesting. I think now you guys are just entering whatever comes to your mind. Okay, this is a difficult question. And again, all of these questions are difficult. These are all from official guide. All of these have stats that indicate that they are difficult. In fact, this apparently is the easiest question in our, based on the data that we have. Again, comparing these three questions, the accuracy is the highest, 56%. Now, again, close choices. A is a pretty close choice. So is D. So is E, based on the stats. So thank you, Rajat, for compiling the stats. Here we have 6 people have selected choice B, 3 people have selected choice D, and 4 people have selected choice E. Okay. All right. So 7 Bs. All right. Thank you. So let's look at this question. And again, one thing that I want all of you to understand is this is the third question, right? Now, difficulty level of all these three questions are comparable, right? However, there are certain questions that appear easy to you. There are certain other questions that appear more difficult. And that's why it's very important to know what kind of passages or what kind of logic that you see in the passage is more difficult for you. Okay. And you need to, for you to figure that out, you need to interact with the material that gives you that level of clarity, or that level of, or that kind of distinction that, okay, this is a quant based passage, this is a passage in which comparison is being used, or this is a passage in which there's a logical gap, right? And that is where the GMAT course comes into picture. Okay, so I want you to understand that okay, it doesn't matter what the difficulty level of the question is. It really matters how well you can understand the logic behind what the author is saying. Okay, and again, there are ways in which you learn those different kinds of logics that the author presents. Okay, so let's come back to this passage. A certain cultivated herb is one of a group of closely related plants that thrive in soil with high concentrations of metals that are toxic to most other plants. So again, let me just go through this. So there are two groups of plants. Okay, again, all of you have read the passage. I don't need to read it right now. There are two groups of plants. One that thrive in high metal content soil. The other, group two, that cannot thrive in high metal content soil. How many of you got this part? That the author is talking about two different groups of plants, one that thrive, the others that do not thrive in the high metal content, in the soil that has high metals. Okay, so Vishal didn't get that. Now again, this is the level of clarity which is very, very important. Okay, when you're reading the passage, now the author is not explicitly, the author is actually stating two toxic to most other plants and then one group of closely related plants. Over here, the author is actually stating both the segments. However, you still were not able to get that. Okay, in some cases the author doesn't even state the other segment needs to be inferred. So again, there is a whole lot of stuff that goes on in a passage in a single line. What all can you infer? And that's where the inference module, you have to learn those things from the inference module. Okay, so again, thank you, Rajat, for explicitly stating that this kind of this is a kind of pre-thinking. Okay, how do you pre-think when there are two segments that are stated? So one of the pre-thinking files is called as pre-thinking segments. Okay, you have pre-thinking quant, you have pre-thinking logical gap, right? So again, that's the level of clarity that you need to have. Okay, all right. So now herb A belongs to group one. This part is explicitly stated over here, right? A certain cultivated herb is one of a group of closely related plants. Now the scientists did experiment in the lab. You say test tube solutions, that's in the lab. Herb A produced large amount of histidine, and histidine makes metals chemically inert. Now, what is the author's conclusion? The author's conclusion is that the herb is able to grow in the metal-rich soil because of high histidine production. So it's a straightforward causal relationship here. Okay. Now, tell me, what all aspects were you not able to get? Now, I know quite a few of you were not able to get number one over here, but now that you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, tell me which all aspects were you not able to get when you read the passage on your own. And if you got all the points, then write down 5 over here. Okay, so Pranjay was not able to get the conclusion. Dishank was not able to get two groups of plants. Okay, Vivek was not able to get 1 and 2. All right, good. Now again, guys, that's the level of clarity. That's the level of not clarity, critique that you have to do when you review the solution. When you're reviewing the solution for this question, in the GMAT platform, you will get all these points in the solution. You have to figure out how many points were you not able to get. And then you have to go back into the passage and figure out, why was I not able to get that? Oh, this part is explicitly stated here. Why did I not get that? Okay, so then you have to see, okay, why did I miss it? Okay, so that's the level of clarity that you need to have. That's the level of critique that you need to do. Okay, all right, now um, so there's quite a few of you who weren't able to understand um, all the points over here. Okay, now, what is it that we have to do? What the question statement is saying is, it would be most important to determine which of the following while you're evaluating the argument. Now, evaluate, the pre-thinking for evaluate goes along the lines of how you pre-think for assumptions, okay? If you know how to pre-think for assumption, basically you can pre-think for anything, for any kind of question, okay? Now, the question really is, what are we evaluating? What is the conclusion here? You always evaluate the conclusion, right? What is the, so in other words, when I'm saying what are we evaluating, in other words, what I'm asking is, what is the conclusion here? So tell me, which one is the conclusion? Are we evaluating that herb A grows in metal-rich soils, or that herb A grows in metal-rich soils because it produces histidine in large amounts? Dishank is saying number two. Absolutely. Number two is what we are evaluating. Okay, not number one. We are not questioning that herb, whether herb A grows in metal-rich soils or not. What we are evaluating is that it grows, the reason why herb A grows in metal-rich soils. Okay, now, pre-thinking. That's the assumption framework. That's the framework which I feel most comfortable. That's how I start off my pre-thinking. In what scenario will the production of large amount of histidine not be the reason for the survival of herb A or for the growth of herb A or thrive of herb A in metal-rich soils? Given that, again, all of the points that I got from the passage, those points come in over here. Given that there are two groups of plants, group 1 thrives in metal-rich soils, group 2 does not, herb A belongs to group 1, and then finding about the histidine production was from the experimental setup. So all the stuff that I understood from the passage falls in my framework over here, because that's the given information, that those are the confines of my passage. Okay, and within those confines, what is it that I have to figure out? In what scenario will the production of large amount of histidine not be the reason for the survival of herb A? Now, what's the output? The output, first of all, so again, you can attack it in multiple ways. Okay, now let's say, so what does it say? Basically, what we are saying is large amount of histidine, right? That's what the author is saying. That's the cause, large amount of histidine. Now, what if by some mechanism I reduce the amount of histidine? Okay, and then also the herb is able to grow. In that scenario, the large amount of histidine was not responsible. In other words, what I'm doing is I'm saying that what if I take the cause away? X leads to Y, where X is large amounts of histidine. What if I take X away? Then will Y still be present? That is what my first pre-thinking is. Okay. Now, my next pre-thinking, what could it be? Group 1, herb A belongs to group 1. Okay. Herb A belongs to group 1. Now, group 1 thrives in metal-rich soils. Now, what if group 1, the group 1 plants don't really have high amount of histidine? Okay, so collectively, this group has a different cause. In that case also, my conclusion will break, that the reason why that the large amount of histidine is not really the reason for survival of herb A, right? That's my second one. So really my second pre-thinking is based on this part over here, that herb A belongs to group 1. Okay, so in other words, what I'm saying is, do other plants of group 1 also exhibit the same mechanism, or do they experience some other mechanism? Okay, the third way in which I could do this is I could hinge upon this experimental setup. This thing was figured out in an experimental setup. What if in the actual conditions, this same effect is not reproducible? The results of lab experiments don't really are not reproducible in the actual conditions, right? In that case, also my conclusion is going to break. So what I'm telling you is that given the experiment, okay, you can have these different ways in which you can pre-think. The first one is your typical causal pre-thinking. Okay, the second one over here is a contextual pre-thinking, because the author has said that herb A belongs to group 1 and group 1 thrives in metal rich soils. You're taking that context and then you're coming up with a pre-thinking, right? Experimental setup is over here. So again, this level of clarity, that how you pre-think, comes from you being exposed to all these different ways in which passages that have from which you grab such the arguments from which you grab these opportunities to pre-think. And if you go through the course the right way, you will be able to, your mind will automatically start to see such linkages in the argument. Then you won't be stuck with, oh, this is the causal. You won't be just stuck with one particular pre-thinking. You will get more exposed to, you will be able to think through a lot more ways in which you can pre-think the assumption. Does this make sense? Yes or no? I know we are way over our time. It's 27 minutes over our time right now. Okay. All right. So good. Now tell me, how many lines of pre-thinking were you not able to explore? Okay. So the first line of pre-thinking is causal. Okay. Second line of pre-thinking is similarity with group 1. Third one is lab experiment result extrapolated to actual conditions. And if you were able to pre-think all the lines of pre-thinking, then write down 4. So tell me, which ones were you not able to pre-think? Because that's the opportunity for you. Because you know, if let's say you were not able to pre-think similarity 1, that means you need to focus on comparison pre-thinking file and the segment pre-thinking file. If you were not able to pre-think the lab experiment 1, that means you need to focus on the logical gap 1. Okay, 2 and 3, Vishal is saying 2 and 3. Okay, I actually got 1 and skipped to the answer choices. So Vishal, it's what you did was okay. I'm not saying that what you did was wrong, but I would really say when you are in the learning mode, try to pre-think as much as you can, because the more you use the passage, the more thought process you put into the passage while you are you basically think about it this way: you've already invested your time in reading the passage, right? So spend a couple of more seconds to just figure out, okay, what all ways can I so what all possible pre-thinking line, what all lines are possible, right? That way you're going to just make sure that you're getting more and more comfortable with pre-thinking. So that's what you need to do. Okay, and that's what you see in each of the files in the course, in each of the application files, in each of the pre-thinking files. You're going to see not 1, not 2, but as many pre-thinking lines of pre-thinking that you can. We are going to talk about that in those files. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at the answer choices. Whether the herb can thrive in soil that does not have high concentrations of toxic metals. Again, we are not concerned about we're not concerned about conditions where there are where there are not that much of toxic metals. We are talking about high metal rich soils, right? So this choice has no bearing. All right, whether others of closely related group of plants also produce histidine in large quantities. Again, that's number 2, which is based on the segments part, right? So that's number 2 over here. This matches our pre-thinking. Let's look at choice C. Whether the herb's high level of histidine production is associated with an unusually low level of production of some other amino acid. Now again, wait a minute, I didn't change this is not correct. I didn't change the answer choice analysis over here. Again, how does that matter whether high level of histidine has some other is linked with unusually low level of production? We don't know as to what the low level of production of some other amino acid does. It doesn't matter. We don't know whether this disrupts something, whether it disrupts the growth or not, right? So that's why this choice has no bearing. So again, this part is wrong over here. Okay, so choice C is wrong. Now, whether growing the herb in soil with high concentrations of metal will over time reduce their concentrations in the soil. Now, again, this is where confines of your argument, knowing the confines of your argument is so very important. What are we concerned about? We are concerned about how does the plant grow? How the herb grows. That's what we are concerned about. Now, what happens? That's my confine, right? Now, what happens after the herb has grown has no bearing on my conclusion, right? My conclusion is really about how does this herb grow. Okay, what is this choice talking about? This choice is talking about whether growing will over time reduce their concentrations in the soil. The plant has already grown, so it's beyond the scope of my argument. That's why this choice is wrong. Okay, now same thing is wrong with choice E is wrong also for the same reason. Whether the concentration of histidine in the growing herb, see the herb has already grown, declines as the plant approaches maturity. I don't care about, the argument doesn't care about what happens after the herb has approached maturity, right? It's already growing. What we are concerned about is how does the herb grow in these conditions. That's why this choice is wrong. Okay, now again, people who selected this choice, again, you have to introspect now. Why is it, did you not understand this choice? So for, again, which group do you belong in? If you don't belong in group A, then there is no point in you doing the answer choice analysis. Okay, answer choice analysis should be done only if you belong in group A. Okay, so that's the level, that's the power of your strategic review over here, figuring out what group do you belong in. So now tell me, for this question, what group do you belong in? Group D for this question. Good. And see, I like that Vishal is saying group D for this question. So again, it's very question specific. And that's why you have to take a holistic idea. The 10 questions that you solve, how many questions did you belong in group D? Dwarkanath Chandra A, okay. Yash D, okay. So now again, a very specific thing that comes about from here is what was unique in this passage that you couldn't understand. Okay, so you need to focus on passages that have this kind of logic, right? So when you go through the solution, you have to see which points did you miss out on. Okay, so Neha also, Bibin also choice group D. Okay, Geo is group C. Okay, you weren't able to visualize. So again, it's the logic behind the passage that you weren't able to get. Okay, Lorenzo is saying group A got answer correct, but struggled to analyze some of the vague answer choices quickly. Again, there were no vague answer choices. So Lorenzo, you haven't done the right analysis. You have not critiqued yourself really well here. Okay, the key thing, none of the answer choices were vague here. If you do everything correctly till pre-thinking, that means you will not be stuck with any choice that you find vague. That's a sign. Okay, so if you found some answer choices vague, that means you haven't really understood the confines of your passage, which means there is some step over here that you haven't done well enough. Okay, so again, be very critical of yourself. Okay, all right. So again, the key thing over here is you have to focus on pre-thinking. And you have to focus on understanding the argument, getting the essence out of that argument, everything from that argument. And that is what sets you apart from people who are not able to score 90th percentile. Okay, so again, you have to make sure you can actually get to that high 90th percentile if you focus on learning pre-thinking the right way. And I urge all of you to listen to Jim's interview here. Okay, click on this link over here, listen to his interview. It's very, very inspiring. Okay, and it tells you, I mean, whatever I have said right now in this session, when you hear it as a person who has practiced it, right, you would basically and gotten the result. He got to a 770 here, right? You would see that it makes sense to go back to the basics, to want to build your foundations first, to build your pre-thinking, and then move on. Okay. All right. Likewise, Rohit Milan, take a look at his debrief again. Pre-thinking ended up saving a lot of time. And look at the number of questions that he solved. He didn't solve hundreds and hundreds of questions because he focused on learning the method the right way. When he got to practicing, he was able to get to that level by solving just about 50 to 60 questions. He focused on doing the strategic review really very well. So that's all I have here. I hope that all of you get the idea of how is it that you should be doing strategic review. Again, be very, very critical. The things that I'm going to tell you is be very critical of yourself. Focus on learning pre-thinking the right way. Okay. Pre-thinking is not predicting the answer. Pre-thinking is not just coming up with one answer. Pre-thinking involves that 200% clarity of the passage. Did you get all the inferences that you needed to get from the passage, right? Those are things which you have to focus on. Okay. Were you able to visualize? Okay. You have to go deep into the passage, not just stay on the surface of the passage, right? And then you need to have, whether you've done all of this or not, how do you figure that out? You figure that out through the detailed solutions that you're going to see on the GMAT platform. And then based on your review of each of these things, you figure out what group do you belong in. And based on what group you belong in, you do the corrective action. And there's no E. Yeah. All right. So let me share the PDF with you over here so that, okay. I'm thinking. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to share the PDF in just a minute here. So tell me, what have you learned so far? Or what have you learned from this session? I've been talking too much here. You must pre-thinking. Good, Vishal, I'm glad it was a need of the hour for you. Yash, you must pre-think. That's very nice. Let me share the PDF. Better to analyze our answer rather than doing a lot of questions. Absolutely right. Okay, this is the link for, I've shared with you the link for the PDF of this session. Let me also share pre-thinking approach. Okay. Which are the question types which require pre-thinking apart from assumption, evaluate the argument? All kinds of questions. All questions require pre-thinking, Pradeep. Without having a clear idea about what it is that you're looking for in the answer choices, you should not be reviewing. You shouldn't even read the answer choices. Thank you, Rajat, for explicitly stating that. And I'm going to share the link to Jim's video debrief. So definitely take a look at that. And this one is Rohit. All right then. So I'm going to end the session here. Again, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions and write to me at pile@edashima.com. Somebody from my team will definitely help you out. So yeah, all right then. And I'll see you on this Friday, wherein we're going to be elaborating on error log for number properties questions. Okay, so it's error log series. So let's make sure that you all make sure that you, whatever time you're investing in your preparation, you make sure that it's completely focused on getting you to that 90th percentile. Okay, all right. Thank you, Juicy. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.